Exploring Prehistoric Taiwan, Life Before History Began. Good morning, everyone. Today, I'd like to take you far back in time, long before cities, schools, or governments ever existed on this island. We are going to explore prehistoric Taiwan, a time that lasted for thousands of years before any written records were made. Prehistoric times may seem distant or mysterious, but they are a very important part of Taiwan's story. In this speech, I will guide you through what we know about the culture, economy, daily life, and villages of prehistoric Taiwan. I will also explain what was happening in mainland China during those same periods, so we can understand Taiwan's early development in a larger historical context. Let's begin. 1. What does prehistoric mean? The term prehistoric refers to the time before written language. In Taiwan, this means before the 17th century, but when we say prehistoric Taiwan, we usually mean the time before Han Chinese settlers arrived in large numbers, and even long before that, starting around 30,000 years ago. Because there are no written records from that time, we learn about it through archaeology, the study of ancient tools, bones, pottery, and other things people left behind. Thanks to many archaeological discoveries, we now know that Taiwan was home to rich and diverse cultures, even in prehistoric times. 2. Early settlements and human arrival. The oldest human remains found in Taiwan are about 30,000 years old, discovered in Taitung and Zhuozhen, Tainan. These people were hunter-gatherers, meaning they hunted animals and gathered wild plants to survive. They didn't live in permanent homes but moved around in small groups. As time passed, people began to settle in villages, especially along rivers and near the coast. One of the most famous early cultures in Taiwan is the Chongbin culture, which existed around 15,000 years ago. These people used simple stone tools and lived in caves or temporary shelters. Later cultures, like the Daepankang culture around 5,000 years ago, show more advanced tools, pottery, and farming techniques. People began to plant millet, taro, and later rice. This shift to farming allowed larger, more stable communities to form. 3. Culture and daily life. As farming became more common, prehistoric people in Taiwan started building permanent homes, making pottery, and developing their own art and beliefs. They wore ornaments made of shells, bones, and jade. Some even carved patterns into their tools and pots. Archaeologists have found burial sites that tell us how these people treated the dead, sometimes placing them in special positions or burying them with tools and jewelry. This shows a belief in the afterlife and the beginnings of spiritual culture. Each region of Taiwan developed its own local styles. For example, the Beinan culture in today's Taitung had large, organized burial grounds and stone coffins. The Yuanshan culture in Taipei built homes with post holes and made unique red pottery. These cultures were not just surviving, they were creating, organizing, and living in complex ways. 4. Economy and trade. In prehistoric Taiwan, the economy was very different from what we think of today. There was no money, but people traded goods, such as food, tools, shells, and jade. One amazing example is jade from Fengtian, Hualien. It was mined and polished into beautiful objects. This jade has been found in the Philippines and Vietnam, which means prehistoric Taiwan had long-distance trade networks with other islands and lands in Southeast Asia. There was also coastal fishing, hunting in the mountains, and animal raising. Wild pigs, deer, and fish were common sources of food. Agriculture was becoming more important, especially in the later prehistoric period. 5. Villages and social structure. As farming improved, people formed villages with dozens or even hundreds of residents. These villages often included thatched houses built with wood and grass, storage pits for food, central open spaces for meetings or rituals. Some larger settlements had signs of leadership or social hierarchy. For example, the presence of more valuable grave goods in some burials suggests that certain people had higher status. People likely lived in clans or extended families, and worked together to grow food and protect the village. The sense of community was strong, and cooperation was necessary for survival. 6. Comparison with mainland China. While Taiwan was developing its prehistoric cultures, many important changes were also happening in mainland China. Around the time of Taiwan's Chongbin culture, China had its Paleolithic cultures, such as the Peking Man site near Beijing, which dates back over 600,000 years. During Taiwan's Daepankang period, around 3000 to 2500 BC, China was moving into the Neolithic age, with famous cultures like Yangshao and Longshan. By the time of Taiwan's Beinan culture, about 1000 BC, China had already entered the dynastic era, with the Shang and later the Zhou dynasties. This comparison shows that while China had centralized kingdoms and written records, Taiwan's societies remained tribal and local, without writing or large armies. However, Taiwan's people had strong maritime skills, and some scholars believe they were part of the early Austronesian expansion, which later spread to the Philippines, Indonesia, and even as far as Hawaii and New Zealand. 7. Legacy and importance. Why does prehistoric Taiwan matter? Because it reminds us that Taiwan's history did not begin with written words or with foreign rule. People have lived on this island for tens of thousands of years, developing their own ways of life, beliefs, and communities. The indigenous peoples of Taiwan today are the living descendants of these prehistoric cultures. Their languages, music, and traditions connect us to a time when Taiwan was already alive with human spirit, even without books or buildings. 8. The ethnic roots of prehistoric Taiwan. Then, I want to talk about something really interesting, the ethnic makeup of prehistoric Taiwan. That means we're looking at who the first people of Taiwan were, where they might have come from, and how they connect to people living today. Even though this was long before written records, scientists and archaeologists have discovered a lot through bones, tools, pottery, and DNA. Let's explore what we know so far. 1. Who were the first people in Taiwan? The earliest known humans in Taiwan appeared about 30,000 years ago. They are called prehistoric peoples because they lived before writing or formal history. One of the most famous examples is the Zhuotian man found in Tainan, which gives us clues about how these early people looked and lived. These people were probably hunter-gatherers, living in small groups, moving around for food, and using stone tools. Over thousands of years, more groups came to Taiwan, often by boat from mainland China or Southeast Asia. 2. The Austronesian connection. Around 5,000 years ago, Taiwan became one of the most important centers of a group of people we now call the Austronesians. The Austronesians are believed to have started in Taiwan and then migrated by boat to places like the Philippines, Indonesia, Polynesia, like Hawaii and New Zealand, even as far as Madagascar in Africa. This means that the indigenous peoples of Taiwan, like the Amos, Atayal, Paiwan, and many others, are closely related to other Austronesian-speaking peoples across the Pacific and Indian Oceans. So even though Taiwan is a small island, it may have been the starting point of one of the world's largest human migrations. 3. Cultural differences among early groups. Taiwan's early inhabitants were not just one group. Archaeologists have found different prehistoric cultures across the island, like Chongbin culture in Taitung, oldest stone tools; Daepankang culture near Taipei, early farming and pottery; Beinan culture in Taitung, organized burial sites. Each culture had its own tools, food, and way of life. This shows that Taiwan was already diverse thousands of years ago. 4. Connection to today's indigenous peoples. Many scholars believe that the people who lived in prehistoric Taiwan are the ancestors of Taiwan's indigenous tribes today. There are currently 16 officially recognized indigenous groups in Taiwan, and many of their languages and traditions still carry signs of those ancient roots. Their stories, songs, and beliefs give us a living connection to Taiwan's deep past. So, what was the ethnic makeup of prehistoric Taiwan? It was a mix of early humans from Asia, later Austronesian settlers, and many unique cultures that developed on the island. These people were not just survivors, they were explorers, builders, and artists. And most importantly, they are still with us today, through the lives and cultures of Taiwan's indigenous peoples. Understanding this helps us appreciate Taiwan not just as a place on the map, but as a bridge between ancient history and the modern world. Conclusion. Prehistoric Taiwan was not empty or forgotten. It was full of life, creativity, and change. From cave dwellers to farming villages, from stone tools to long-distance trade, the early people of this island built the foundation for the Taiwan we know today. When we understand our prehistoric roots, we gain a deeper respect for the land we live on and the people who came before us. Thank you for listening.